Hello there, and welcome to what promises to be a dynamic and inspiring discussion of the plethora of challenges and pressure points leaders are experiencing in today's volatile and complex landscape. In a world marked by rapid technological advancements, unpredictable markets, and shifting employee expectations, leading employees today at any level and function can be most daunting and overwhelming. To that end, in this month's episode of Executive Wellness Unplugged, we will be discussing the following leadership challenges and pressure points as decided on by this talented panel, whom I will be introducing momentarily. These challenges include leading through technological advancements and change fatigue, navigating complexities in hybrid work models, embracing future-forward leadership practices, bridging generational gaps in the workplace, closing skill gaps and promoting talent growth, and mitigating the mental burden on leaders. So how do leaders rise to the occasion in today's VUCA landscape? Well, to address this, we'll be discussing the transformative power of coaching, particularly performance coaching, as a critical leadership skill. But first, let me welcome and introduce this wonderful panel to the Executive Wellness Unplugged podcast. So perhaps wave as I introduce you. Carmo Siri is a seasoned healthcare executive and a certified executive coach who has served in 3 hospital president roles and 2 system chief strategy officer positions. And he's had the honor of supporting leaders to become more effective through executive and experiential coaching, mentoring, and advisory services. Gabrielle Baumeier is a seasoned executive leadership coach and founder of the Baumeier Coaching, and she brings over 25 years of expertise in guiding leaders and teams to their highest potential. Her experience spans industries such as construction and software, along with international management consulting in Canada. And she partners with executives, board members, and leaders of all levels to build impactful strategies for growth and performance. Kim Galton is a seasoned executive coach and workplace wellness consultant who, leveraging her 20-year corporate background, collaborating with HR directors, talent development, VPs, and CEOs, has helped transform the lives of executives and managers in their teams through tailored wellness coaching and robust workplace wellness initiatives. And Peter Kelly is a workplace wellness consultant, coach, and co-director owner of the Workplace Wellness Center of Excellence. And he co-authored with me our book, Cultivating Healthy and Vibrant Workplaces. And drawing on his extensive experience as a former supervisor with Royal Dutch Shell, he's now luckily retired. He brings diverse leadership to workplace well-being, OH&S, and coaching experience to the organization's leaders and the employees he serves. And by way of introduction, I am Lisa Kelly, the founder of the Workplace Wellness Center of Excellence, and again, co-author of the Cultivating Healthy and Vibrant Workplaces book. As an executive coach and workplace wellness certification provider and consultant, I have had the privilege of helping optimize the health, the well-being, and performance of many organizations, senior leaders, and teams across multiple industries. So get ready for an engaging conversation as we explore how we can all become catalysts for change in this exciting new era of leadership. So let's jump right in to our discussion with the first topic, leading through technological advancements and change fatigue. So we don't have to look too far today. It's in our headlines, our news feeds, of the rapid pace of change and the change fatigue that's happening as a result. And I know we're all smiling because, we're coaches, we coach leaders, we coach organizations. I train other executive coaches through our programs, and we're constantly talking about, the rapid pace of change and change fatigue and the impact that's having on organizations, but leaders and also, those they serve and support, under their care. And so, as a leader, how do you become more resilient yourself? How do you better manage your energy, your focus, your creativity? And as wellness providers, I would argue that first and foremost, we have to take care of ourselves, right? Take care of our well-being and all that that requires, because we're only as good as a leader to the extent that we prioritize our well-being. So that's just one thing I want you to keep in mind. But, as a leader, we really want to be helping our employees identify strategies to help them, and as leaders, help our teams become more adept without getting in a state of overwhelm. And we need to do that by helping balance innovation with stability while still maintaining core operations. So as I say all that, Peter, anything you'd like to add? Is there anything from your experience? You just, recently retired from a supervisor job in oil and gas. What was your experience there? Were you feeling the pains of this, just prior to leaving a few months ago or in the past few years?
Absolutely. Our company was going through a lot of technological changes for sure, and just changes in general. So that's bringing around a lot of fatigue. Employees every week to come in, they'd say, "Well, what's new today? What's happening?" Right? And bottom line is the AI and technology advancements. If you don't embrace them, you're going to be left behind. There's no doubt about that, right? And I guess the way to help the teams through it, you kind of had to engage with them and let them know that it's coming. We need to embrace it. Nobody likes change, but it's definitely a part of as you advance and get better at what you're doing. Uh, at our place of work, there was uh, a lot of multi-skilling was the key
Mhm.
phrase, I guess, meaning that operations who were doing their regular duties for the last 20 years, there was about four different things added in now that other trades were possibly doing, but because of technological advances, uh, operators were now able to rack out, like de-energize electrical equipment safely because there was protocols built in and safeties that would enable them to do it.
Mhm.
Uh, like steam trap preventive maintenance, that type of thing.
For all our
Uh,
OHS people here who would know this.
well, the bottom line is it made things more streamlined,
Yeah.
more efficient, but the employees didn't get it at first. They're thinking, okay, there's changes coming. What does this mean for my job down the road? And so you
Mm,
had to kind of get them on board, talk to them about it. And when they realized that they could implement some ideas to make the system better, and that these ideas were being looked at by management and actually implemented,
mhm,
they felt empowered and it gave them more buy-in for sure. So I think coaching them to kind of just try it out
mhm,
and see what worked and what didn't work was a big thing. And the fact that the guys and the girls were
mhm.
definitely jumping on board and giving it a try
Yeah.
made a big difference. And we were listening as management to their concerns and acting on it to try to
Yeah.
make things better.
You bring up, and those in HR and other leaders will probably know the concepts of participative management. Certainly more back in the day. I don't know if organizations are still using, I don't know, Gabrielle, do you still hear the term participative management tossed around much these days?
A bit, but it's becoming less common.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe we need to get back into that. And there's so many tentacles right here with coaching and overlap and alignment with concepts like participative management, for example, right? But things like psychological safety. So thanks, Peter, for that. And things like psychological safety and forming cross-functional tech teams. I'm just looking at some notes I had made here. Even anticipating tech trends. There's a lot on the shoulders of leaders today, and we can, and they can't do it alone. So it's really critical that we embrace concepts like and practices like participative management, right? And as Peter said, and I know, being my better half, I would hear often about, I mean, he was actually a very good supervisor and coach and often used a coach approach and mindset when he, in dealing with his employees, right? Um, yeah, anyone else, just to bring it a little more forward now, a big part of what we want to do in our discussion today is talk about the importance of, as leaders, embracing and developing coaching skill sets, specifically performance coaching. And we're actually, incidentally, we'll talk more about it later, but we have a course coming up called Leader Turn Coach for all levels of leaders. And everyone you see today on our panel will be facilitators in that course happening this March. And I'll give you the dates later on. As I mentioned earlier, the second pressure point challenge, however you want to, consider it, is navigating complexities in hybrid work models. So, Kim, I know you have some thoughts and Carm on this. I'll go to you, Kim, first.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where you almost have to look at it on a case by case basis. But so many people, especially if they're being told, okay, you've been working remote and now you need to go into the office, whether it's 4 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever that number is, that can have a lot of impacts. Perhaps the employee had this impression that they could move 3 hours away because housing was cheaper there. And now they're in a position where it's like, how am I going to commute 3 hours one way, 4 days or 5 days a week, right? So there's a lot of complexities with hybrid when there's the big switch, as we saw in the pandemic, right? When everybody was, working in person, then had to switch to working remotely in some capacity. And now we're at that point in time where, people are going back into the offices. And so how's that switch being, reenacted? And, how is that a gentle movement and feeling safe for employees, right? Going back to psychological safety, right? There's so many different layers with the hybrid, working situation and how an employee could be feeling about that. And of course, as leaders, there's so many different dynamics that they need to be mindful of. And how are they collaborating with those employees and how are they connecting on the same page? We talk at times, you mentioned a little bit ago about generational gaps and those connections, but then you also have cultural differences, right? And so how do you have all those for everyone to feel, right, that they're on an equal level playing field as part of the team, having that connection. I think those are some of the pieces that I've been seeing that are
Well, it's
most prominent right now for me.
yeah, thank you for that. It's interesting. We are just talking before we went on camera here that that we're seeing in the headlines now about these major companies mandating now and governments that employees return. So that's creating a whole other level of challenges and complexities for leaders, getting assimilated and then dealing with employees who are disgruntled maybe because, like you said, they're living far away and now they got to relocate, towns or cities or what have you, or maybe look for new work. So that all just layers in, right? And
Yeah.
that's further stress for the leader. And so, operating as a leader, as coach, right? Carm, what comes to mind now? Anything you want to add to what Kim said? And Kim, you can jump in here too. But moving on to the second part of this discussion of, how can operating with a coaching mindset and approach as a leader help minimize these complexities now with the return to office, or maybe even still if some organizations are operating from a hybrid work model?
Yeah, Lisa, thanks. As Kim talked about and as you're describing, I believe there's these harmonic waves that are going on with respect to hybrid work models, right? Because in 2020, if you didn't have to physically be there, like in an oil by an oil rig or running a machine or in healthcare being at the bedside, those leaders and their team members were typically at home.
Mhm.
And everybody was engaging through Zoom or through Teams or some other remote way. And now we're finding that the wave is turning back towards being in the work environment, being part of the team, seeing people on a daily basis, interacting with them in person.
Mm.
And I believe there's this flexibility that we now have to think about as it relates to hybrid work environments. That there could be times in which being together and being in that work environment makes sense. And there could be times where we could be at home and be as effective and efficient by not being in the work environment, right? So part of what leaders, I believe, at this point in time have to think about is what does that flexibility look like? And no different than you talked about where we have to engage with our teams, you have to do the same thing here. So if someone believes that their productivity could be very high being in a home environment and working remotely, and someone else believes that being in a collaborative environment in the institution or building or wherever the work environment is more productive for them, can you be flexible and allow that to happen? Right?
Hmm.
At the same time, I think leaders have to think very seriously about how do I also manage and lead during these very challenging times. So if you're going to have a coaching opportunity with somebody, typically doing that in person could really be better than doing it remotely because you're trying to pay attention to body language and eye contact and movement and minimize external distractions that could be coming their way. Somebody knocking at the door, somebody ringing the doorbell while they're trying to have this coaching opportunity around performance. So I think the leaders in today's world have to be very astute to when is a remote work environment a productive one. When could it be challenging? And what are the needs of those that you work with? And try to be a little bit more flexible than everybody has to do it one way or the other.
Right.
And so that's what I'm seeing today. And as you know, I'm sure every one of us as coaches, a lot of my work is remote with these leaders that I'm working with, because to try to fly around the country and have one-on-one hour-long sessions can be very costly, very difficult to navigate the schedule. If somebody's schedule changes and you've now flown into New York and they say, I can't meet with you today, what do? You lose a great deal of productivity, different than if you're there managing an entire team that has a central location, right? So I think we just need to be flexible and be open to not everybody has to manage it the same way.
Gabrielle, did you have something you want to add there?
I do. Thanks, Lisa. On Carm's point about really being in tune with, at some level, with what's going to work for that person, what's going to work for that employee, I'll share a bit of a case study, and it's about me. When I first entered corporate America, I worked for a software company out of California, and I was a remote employee starting in 1999. So this was way before being remote was a thing. And so by the time COVID hit, I was thinking, wow, people are finally on board when we actually had to be remote.
Right.
The point is, though, I worked in a culture, in a company where they were very clear about their objectives, clear about the outcomes, and then gave me rein to do my job. I was in Texas, they were in California, and I worked and continue to work very well that way. Very independent, very much a self-starter. In fact, when I would go into the office the 2, 3, 4 times a year or whatever it was, I actually got less done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tend to thrive in an environment where I can really put my head down and focus and get in tune with whatever the task is. So my charge to leaders who are looking at what is the answer for hybrid, consider that there is not an answer, but there's just really looking to see what is going to work.
Yeah.
And you might be surprised.
Yeah, Carm?
Yeah, I mean, to Gabriella's point, I was coaching a pharmaceutical executive in Philadelphia, and he has been in a worldwide company for the last 10 years. And 2/3 of his team do not live in the United States. So he has been managing through remote means for almost a decade. And so it can be done, and it can be done effectively. I think the sensitivity around who and when and how becomes more important than everybody has to do it one way.
Right.
So, but I really do believe, as you suggested, it's got to be a discussion between you, your team, and your leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And then, so just again to wrap it up, Kim, is there anything further you want to say or add? Or?
Yeah, I wanted to mention Simon Sinek, and hopefully I said his
Mm.
last name correctly. You know, he has this incredible YouTube video on leadership and the guide and skills to leadership. I think it's something like that. One of the things that he mentions, going back to performance, whether somebody's remote or in person, is having that conversation. You know, instead of, oh, I notice you're not performing well. You've got, 45 days to, do a 360 here. His approach is really a coach approach. And when we were talking about taking that coach approach, open growth mindset, when I saw that the other day, it made me like, it just clicked in. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, exactly. You know, his approach is, okay, I see you haven't met those goals. How are you?
Yeah.
How can we support you so we can help you get there? So whether somebody's working in person or remotely, those kind of coach approach conversations can help with performance and help get to the same end goal, regardless of I'm working through Zoom or I'm working out of physical office with everybody
That's
else.
really irrelevant, right? How am I supporting you? Is the work getting done? How are you doing as an employee? We never want to lose sight of that, right? Because again, as coach, we want to be as focused on the well-being of our employee as the performance, because we know, again, the well-being will help facilitate in a big way their performance and their deliverables, right? So
Exactly.
just to wrap it up, and incidentally, I address a lot of some of Simonson's practice that can lend themselves to um, optimizing, our remote work environment, and I talk about that in Peter and I do in our book, Cultivating Healthy and Vibrant Workplaces. So the third topic or challenge or pressure point I'd like for us to talk about is embracing future forward leadership practices. Now, again, as you can appreciate, a lot of these concepts, there's an overlap, of course, right, between them, and that's okay. Sometimes, as my prof used to say, emphasizing the obvious, it's making the obvious more obvious. It's sometimes important. So, what does that mean by embracing future forward leadership practices, right? Karim, what comes to mind when I say that? I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, Lisa, it's really interesting the words that are being used here, future forward leadership, because I believe we can learn a lot from our past.
Mm.
And what's interesting about leadership, at least in my experience of being a leader and then being a coach, is that there are some common characteristics that people can look at with respect to leading others,
Mhm.
especially as it relates to leading teams. So we do talk about how do we lean forward into leadership, but to me, we learn from our past.
I love
And
that.
there's some basic things that you've already described that it's really interesting as I'm coaching people. They believe like there's these formulas of leadership. That if I can just get the formula right, I will be a great leader. And the reality is it's some basic stuff.
Mhm.
It's someone that inquires first before speaking, right? Those are
Yes.
things that leaders find they'll create the right cultures. As it relates to teams, there are some that believe that the characteristics of highly effective team, there's only three, and that's all you need. There are some that I've read that believe there's 12 different characteristics. What I have found is there's 8 characteristics that are fairly common amongst teams and how we can lead people. And those are things like first, and they're not in any particular order, but I'll go through them briefly.
Mm.
Is there trust amongst the team members? Pretty critical in order to lead a group of people is that they have to trust each other, right? Secondarily, there's some people that will hire teams based on a homogeneous group of people
Mhm.
because they don't want conflict amongst the team members.
Mm.
I have found, and the data will tell you that conflict, as long as you can resolve it constructively, is actually one of the best things that teams can do.
Right.
because they generate new ideas by challenging the thought, opposed to groupthink of everybody just saying, let's just do it that way. So resolving conflict constructively. Certainly a commitment to a shared mission, vision, and values. What's the purpose of our organization, and are we all committed to that? And if we are, we will find ways to not talk about each other or to have difficulties in relating to each other, but instead find ways to help fulfill that mission, vision, and values.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is that there needs to be clearly defined roles and responsibilities amongst the team members, right? Which is no different. And I'll use a football analogy because we're getting close to the big game. I don't know if I can say Super Bowl or not, but the big game. The center doesn't go out and say, I want to play quarterback in this play, right? That role is not where they're most talented in. So do we have defined roles and responsibilities? Do we have open, respectful, and clear communication, right? And do we use active listening? And we've already talked about that in each one of our sections today.
Can I just stop you really quickly? Because I just want to, when you talked about it before, I mean, let's come back to Stephen Covey, bless his soul. I mean, he always said, seek first to understand and then be understood.
Yeah.
And I just think that just really sums it up there when we talk about active listening. So yeah, carry on.
Yep, absolutely. We already talked about it in the last section. Do we have goals and results orientation? And you couple that with both individual and collective.
Yeah.
And I find, especially leading executive teams, that one's the biggest challenge is the individual and collective. Because if you have someone that's incentivized to reduce their cost, and you have on the same team somebody that's incentivized to grow the business, you can't do those simultaneously, right? Now, you can generate more revenue that offsets your expense, but if someone's trying to cut cost, you can't be in a growth mode,
right?
Because growth costs money.
It's more
so
challenging.
Incentive, yeah. So they might work on their individual goals, which means collectively they're not working together at all.
Mm-hmm.
You need to celebrate success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important, and show appreciation. Mm-hmm. And then finally, one that's on everyone's list, and I struggle a little bit with the verbiage, so I've kind of added my own, is the word accountability,
mm-hmm.
which to me denotes more task orientation. And I prefer the word ownership.
Okay.
If you can take true ownership of the organization's mission, and everything you do, you treat it as if it's yours, and the team does that collectively, then you will find that those characteristics will denote, it doesn't matter if you're in a manufacturing business, a hospitality organization, if you're providing financial services to somebody, if your team takes on those 8 characteristics, you will find you should effectively lead your organization going forward.
Nice. And Gabrielle, how about yourself? What comes to mind when we think about embracing future forward leadership? And again, you can speak to as well the importance of leaders, again, leading from a coaching mindset, a coaching practice, if you will.
Yes. I'll go to a couple of the points that Carm just made, and that is what I've learned is when I'm working with leaders and having them start to see themselves and take on the possible position that they're a coach, because they don't know that they can be.
Yeah.
Perhaps sometimes when they come and are in this conversation to begin with.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So having them take on an idea called, and again, this is to Carm's point about conflict resolution, is that if they can be a leader, a coach who can hear anything, it can go very far. Now, to put someone who's in a manager role or a leadership role and tell them, yeah, you can actually set up your team so that they come to you with anything.
Mm-hmm.
They will tell you anything if you let them.
Yeah.
Now, they might say that they don't like you. Now, that's up to you to deal with, obviously.
Yeah.
But if the people I work with, if they can really try that on, let people say whatever they need to say. It's always better because they're going to be saying it someplace else, if not with you.
Can I just interject there before you go on? If you, I'm a big avid, social media person because I do it for my business and that. But in the past few months, I've been noticing it, and when the short reels going around and couples will do it, is we listen and we don't judge. And I think that really, aligns with what you're saying there, right? Just if an employee can come to their leader slash coach and they know they'll listen without judging, right? I mean, they may not necessarily get the answers they want, but at least if they feel they're listened to without being judged, yeah, anything you want to add to that?
It goes far. It goes very far. And you can even take it one level further. We're human beings, and guess what? We're going to judge. It's kind of like telling me not to be a brunette. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't be 4'11, Gabrielle. Just don't do that. We're human and we're going to judge. And if leaders can be aware that they are doing that and then be responsible for that and just notice it. If you judge and go down route A, you'll get one result. If you judge and go down route B, you'll get another result. The point is, you want your people coming to you and letting you know what really is going on. Because if they don't bring it to you, you're blind to it.
Yeah.
You're absolutely
Then you're
blind.
doing damage control probably a month or two
Right.
down the road, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Carm, I saw you raise
Yeah.
your hand there.
Yeah, Gabrielle, I'd love to build on this, and Lisa and I have had a lot of discussion around this next topic. But what I find that we do is because we get so emotional about our work and we are connected to it, that a lot of times we are placing intent on people's behavior. We know you're doing this because. And what I learned and I was taught through a great organization while I was being coached is that if you can, instead of take that emotion and take a step back and be able to have a conversation with someone that says, on this date, during this meeting, at this time, you said the following, and the impact on me was I felt this. Now, what you're not doing is accusing them that they intended to make you feel that way. What you're not saying is you tried to make me look bad. What you're saying is your behavior had an impact on me such that I felt devalued.
Right.
Now you're opening up the conversation to allow them then to say, but here was my intent.
Right.
And now you can start to say, how do we build from that? But when you first start with, at this meeting, you called me out and I was embarrassed because it looked like you were trying to get a leg up on me, then you put them in a defensive mode and it's really not going to be constructive.
Nice.
So if we really can talk about facts, this date, this time, this set of behaviors on their part drew out the following impact on me, then it allows them to really clarify, and now you start working together. And that's to me how you can try to get away from this emotional, you did this to me on purpose.
Takes the emotions out of the equation. Well, this is great, and we could spend a whole hour or two just talking on this topic alone without question, and we will in the course, Leader Turn Coach for sure. There's something to be said for, as leaders, as you said it very eloquently, both of you in your responses, developing more self-awareness of how we're coming across. And if we step into it, just backstep and say, I am sorry. I did not mean to come across judgmental or whatever. People, will appreciate apologies, right? That's to be human, right? And as leaders, really help our employees through leading by example and demonstrating, develop more agency for their own awareness and their personal success, their contributions to organizational success, and taking ownership and that accountability, right? And that could be a coaching conversation in and of itself, which again, we get into in the course. And the other thing I want to talk about, which we get into in the book, is helping our employees. And sadly, I don't know how much this is done or taken seriously. I often talk to people I coach. Yeah, I did a performance development plan, is sitting on the corner. I don't look at it. My leader doesn't look at it, but yet they could be such powerful tools if we use them effectively. And one thing I talk about in our book is not only developing performance, professional goals, but also developing well-being goals. And you will be amazed, and I know my husband did a lot of this, Peter, here, when he would coach his employees, he would get to the heart of it. He would listen and listen without judgment and just listen and listen. And people would come to him and he would sometimes help them navigate getting through, to their, um, employee assistance programs or what have you. Right. And sometimes, he would do this, take an employee out and drive around the site in the truck and just listen to them. Now, I know some leaders don't have time for that. You don't think you have time, but what is that saying about an ounce of prevention, right? A pound of cure. Now, moving on, the other thing, as I introduced earlier, is bridging generational gaps in the workplace. And we'll probably go through this pressure point fairly quickly, but Gabrielle, what's been your experience there? What are you seeing on the radar? What's been your experience working with organizations? How are they navigating this? How are leaders navigating it, especially now with all the extra complexities now of returning to work? And then, dear Lord, we have now the, I don't want to get political here, but we are having organizations and countries mitigate or take away, dismantle DEI programs, which is so important for helping. I've heard now companies are taking away employee resource groups, right? And all these things were so important for helping to bridge and mitigate these generational gaps in the workplace, right? So, Gabrielle, what would you like to say on this?
I'd love to speak to this. So I'll start with a bit of a high level comment on it. And it's something that we all know, and that is we tend to be trepidatious or scared of what we don't know. There's one generation, someone who's in their 50s and 60s, and now they're working with someone in their 20s. There is a gap there. There are two completely different worlds, and the tendency is to be hesitant to get into each other's worlds, to actually open your ears and listen and be compassionate and empathetic and whatnot. And so now that we have we've always had the age gap, but it's somehow it seems like it's even wider and farther now, just given our political landscape and given the all kinds of elements that go into the gaps. It's seemingly getting harder and harder to address it. So it's natural that the programs that address it are the first ones to be cut, because those are the ones that we don't know really, quote, how to do.
Right.
It's as if, when people do budget cuts, they usually do the training first. It's like, let's just cut the training first, because training people is actually difficult.
Right.
It actually is not that easy. However, it becomes something like the addressing of generational gaps or the DEI programs. It becomes the line item where we say, oh yeah, we'll just cut that one because it doesn't do any good. Well, maybe it doesn't do any good because we're not actually addressing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's a bit of a circular thing. But as leaders and as people who are looking for an advantage of how to navigate our landscape, it's worth looking at the things that people don't want to look at. It's kind of like you push into the tough stuff, because the tough stuff is where the growth actually lives.
Yeah. The tough stuff is where the growth lives. And just to add to this, and anyone else can jump in quickly on this, is what I've been hearing, and I don't like to label. My daughter always says, Mom, don't label things. She's a millennial. But from what I'm reading, this younger generation they have this insatiable need to know, right? They want to be, and Simon Sinek speaks to this, they want to be, they're exploring their why. And they want to know their why in the organization, right? And they want to know that there's alignment and commitment, ethically, morally, whatever, between their personal mission and the organization's mission, and that their work matters and that they're working towards a higher purpose. They're not working for a paycheck. Some arguably will say, well, baby boomers are more inclined to work for a paycheck, and yeah, if my mission aligns, fine, but if not, that's fine too. But yet the younger generations, it's really important to them. And then this becomes a generational divide, a divergence sometimes, right? Between sometimes our older generations, right? And our younger ones, sad but true. So it's something to be aware of. My
Yeah,
gracious. So many.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I would even boil it down to something simpler than mission, even though I'm very much aligned with the mission dialogue.
Right.
I believe, based on what I've heard and those that I've interacted with, they want to know the why am I doing what I'm doing,
Mm,
even if it's simple as a task.
right.
Why do I have to put these three blocks in this order?
Hmm.
And typically, as Gabrielle identified, the older generation is going to say, because that's the way we put the policy together. That's the procedure. When we've always put those three blocks in that order, we've always had the right outcome.
Right.
And what they want to be able to say and have a leader be flexible enough to actively listen is, but if we put the blocks in this order and we add a fourth block,
Mm,
the outcome can be even better.
mhm.
Will you give me a chance to do that?
Right.
So I agree that they want to align mission,
Mm,
but I also believe it comes down to the simplest issue of just help me understand the importance of why I have to do it this way. And is there an option to look at an alternative?
and that's
And
great.
that's,
Yeah, I
yeah.
was just gonna say that's great too. And thank you for that. Is that again, that's seeking first to understand. It's approaching your leadership role from a coaching mindset, right? There's a lot of interplay there. Kim or Peter, anything you want to add to this from your experience in the workforce or working with clients?
Well, one of the things that I kept coming to mind that I wanted to share or expand on is, when you're looking at different generations, right, their behaviors of why they are saying things is how they grew up. It's their environment, right?
Mm,
It's the psychology of that generation, right? And then the psychology of other generations, like going back to what Carm said, oh, well, a leader might say, oh, an older leader might just say, oh, this is what the way it is. I can think of my grandfather's generation. I mean, he would be like, this is how it was because that's what his father said.
yeah.
But, psychology and parenting and teaching has changed so much over the decades.
Mhm.
So we've, almost trained different generations to have different expectations. And if we're not mindful of that,
Yeah.
then that's where we're getting in our own way.
Very nice.
Mhm.
And
Very.
going back to the coach approach, we're always taking a neutral space when
Mm,
we're coaching. And so if we go in and enter that conversation with the coach approach, then we're creating a neutral space for everyone to feel safe and
right.
vulnerable to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah. This is such an important topic. Again, we could spend a whole hour on it as well. Peter, yeah.
Just a quick comment regarding what Carm was talking about. The younger generation doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have anything of value to add because I know in my
Oh, actually the
workplace,
opposite.
yeah, my workplace not long ago, there's a procedure we use is very tedious, haul down a major compressor type thing. And one of the young guys questioned the procedure. Why are we doing all these steps? Is it
Mm,
necessary? Like, and further investigation, I think they might have cut, like, it's a 2 day procedure to get this compressor ready. I think they cut it down to like a 30-hour procedure. That so the efficiency was amazing. That they cut out a bunch of stuff just because it was there for all these years, and finally someone and questioned it. And when a deep dive went and looked into it, yeah, why are we doing it? So
right.
the younger generation, just because they're young, doesn't mean they don't have a lot to add. And being a coach, you need to be able to listen to that with an open mind, like the active listening component again, and take it for full value, and really check it out and say, hey, this is a good point. We should check
Yeah.
this out. Right.
And that's why, having that mix of the older generations, if you will, with the younger is so valuable for organizations, right? And really we should be viewing as leaders and organizations these generational differences and divergences as strengths rather than challenges, right? And really harnessing that and harnessing diverse perspectives. So thank you both for that. Our pressure point of closing skill gaps and promoting talent growth, and it comes back to Gabrielle, the point you made around training, right? And I used to work in a center of excellence as a learning specialist and in training and in organization training. And yeah, we would get this a lot, right? Well, yeah, the training's a line item we can cut out. It's not going to really severely affect operations. And yet, yeah, it will. Trust me, if it doesn't immediately, it will come back to haunt you at some point when you cut those vital programs out, right? As the same way when I'm hearing about ERG groups, employee resource groups getting cut out now, it's just, oh, I just feel like we're taking so many steps back from the progress and gains we've made over the years, right? Um, so Kim, in terms of closing skill gaps and promoting talent growth, and Gabrielle, if there's anything else you want to add or anyone else in the panel here, what comes to mind? And again, speaking as well about how a leader as a coach, would embrace and approach closing skill gaps and promoting talent growth. Again, what comes to mind for you there, Kim?
I've got a few different things. One of the things is that I've seen really successful in several organizations is where the leader will go ahead and let that employee wear a few different hats. So they
Mm,
have the main hat that is for their main role, but then they also are learning maybe their cube mates role in the event somebody is sick, or they have this, maybe the leader has in the back of their mind, okay, we might be winning these two projects, and if we win these two projects, we're going to have to grow, we're going to be expanding, we might need to, add on, 30 or 40, new employees. And so how am I already aligning the current employees I have and utilizing their strengths so that I can give them some of these other opportunities while I bring in the newer employees and get them trained. And then, of course, having those systems and processes in place so that everyone has that to reflect on, whether it's, videos that have been created on demand or manuals, but knowing that there's multiple layers to help provide education and growth opportunities, but then also those backup plans like, okay, I remember I just went to 4 days of 8 hours of training. I learned a lot. My brain is here, and the employee needs to go back. And as for the leader, they're, navigating how many different roles. And there's going to be pieces that they might not have at the ready when they're, running 1,000 miles per hour. And so having those resources for them as well, so that they can help reinforce, some of those requirements,
yeah.
just helps create that, okay, I've got this. I know what I'm doing from all points of view, right? Having that confidence.
And I think just to come back, and you may have touched on this, and Gabrielle, I'll let you speak in a second here, but this comes from my training days, is something that really concerns me today is the degree to which, or the quality of job scope analysis isn't being happening, because how much, and I hear this a lot, as a wellness coach with leaders and that and executives, and employees that we work with and other coaches I coach relay this back, that I'm taking on the work now of, two extra people. Maybe they just had a reorg. My husband went through this, some
Yeah.
supervisors who had a span of control of 16 employees now have a span of control of 32. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. And they couldn't even do their job with 16 employees. And this is not just to single out his company, it's happening a lot now. And so how can we even be looking at when we're overburdening and having unrealistic expectations, because we as leaders didn't take the time to really fully understand and get appreciation for what's being expected of our employees, right?
Yeah.
And then how do we advance our employees? Because we need these employees to be advancing into leadership roles. So that's a whole beyond the technical skill training. We've got to be advancing them and training them up in leaders, leaders as coaches, and all that's
Mhm.
important and critical to
Yeah.
support them, because they're going to be the future of our organizations, right? So,
Yeah.
Gabriella, anything you want to speak to that?
I do have a couple of things. So, somebody listening to this podcast, this audio, could be saying to themselves, wow, we have that issue now, or I don't want to come up with that. I don't want to eventually have that issue called we're burning out our people, or, we have 4 people doing the jobs of 16 or whatnot. And here's what I would suggest is to whatever level you can, start to create some cross-functional projects
Mm.
that people can do
Yes.
together. So having people from different departments come together on some project which will achieve XYZ, whatever the XYZ is. Obviously, it could be something that's related to the business, or it could be something that's not related to the business, but bringing people together as in opportunities to learn from each other goes very, very far. Because ultimately, people, anybody who's in a professional arena chances are they want to develop themselves.
Right.
Chances are they want to get better at something. And chances are they won't necessarily know what that is or know how to tell you.
Mm.
And so the more you can create teams where you find out and can draw out in organic ways what people do want to learn and be developed in, it goes very far. And when people have the experience of being developed,
Mhm.
having their professional skills be harnessed and developed, then they stick around.
They do. They do. They
They
do.
want to stay.
They do. And that's a really important point. There's more of an allegiance to an organization, which is not
Yes.
happening. The average tenure right now of an employee is like a couple of years, right? And just
Right.
all the
Right.
waste and the time, they're just getting seasoned in a couple of years to do their work
Right.
and to be a fit for the company, right? And so
Right.
we always have this revolving door. We're just spinning our wheels and spending a lot of money that will not be recovered, right? And it's lost
Right.
opportunities. For sure. When it comes to mind as well, the whole concept of mutual or reverse mentoring, right? I don't know how much of that is happening. And sometimes that would happen even organically through the employee resource groups, which we're dispensing of today, which breaks my heart,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's again, and approaching all this as a leader, as coach, is just have that inquiry mind, right? Ask leaders and then ask their employees, and then where needed, coach up your
Right.
concerns, speak to senior leadership. Because if we don't become the change we seek, we're just going to be again on that hamster wheel, spinning and spinning and getting further frustrated as a leader, as employees, right?
Right. And I'll add one more thing about
Yeah,
this
sure.
this whole concept and idea of cross-functional teams. It's a good practice ground for practicing being a coach.
Hmm.
So, for example, I have a client, this leader in this company, construction company, she had been wanting to for a long time put together an employee advisory committee.
All right.
So a subset of people who go out and listen to the people in the field, this, that, and the other is going on, and we really like to see that improvement. And so we launched her team, but it was a different type of team than they had ever had. And she took on the role of being a coach
Mhm.
because she saw that if she improved her ability to listen and to ask questions and to elicit the best of them and create an environment where they could give her ideas, that the team would foster and grow organically
Right.
and they would learn from each other. And so it was a very safe space for her to do that.
Yep.
And now, I mean, you can extrapolate the results, right? She's doing it with her direct reports as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And now she's even elevated to say, all right, I want to get a coaching certification. And
Right.
that's just, Carm, you probably heard it, right? Any of her clients that say, I want to be a coach too, that's just like
That's pretty encouraging, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's a feather in everyone's cap
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
know the value of it.
Yeah, for sure. Karen, before we move on to the last topic, is there anything you want to add to what we've been talking about?
I could spend the whole
Another
day talking about
hour.
this subject. I think the most important thing you guys have identified already is listen to your folks and understand,
Mm,
help support them, and then realize many times individuals in leadership roles end up believing that because somebody's very talented at their work, they need to go to the next level within the organization, especially in a supervisory management or leadership role. But then I don't think they're necessarily listening to the person because many times that person, as both Gabrielle and Kim suggested, they want to become more skilled at their current role
right.
and they're happy in the role, but we decide we need to promote them, then we don't train them, and then they end up being in leadership roles and saying, this isn't what I wanted to do in my career, but somebody forced me into it. So
Right.
part of it is just listen to what they're saying.
Right.
And as they said, if they want to become more skilled in their field, then how do you help them to do that opposed to suggest to them they should be going higher up in the organization into leadership? So it's that active listening, it's the understanding of what their needs are, and then supporting them along that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well said. Thank you for that. Okay, so that brings us into the last pressure point or challenge leaders are facing today is, the mental burden they're carrying and their employees, right? But I want us to really focus right now on this last discussion point around how do we help leaders mitigate the mental burden on themselves? So, Kim, do you want to make a stab at that one?
Yeah, as you say, one of the biggest things that I've seen is helping them implement stress management techniques.
Mm.
Because typically, and I've got this one particular executive director in my mind right now, um, where something happened several months ago, and it's impacting business policies and practices that are coming up in the next month. Sorry to be vague, but um, and she's doing everything she can do behind closed doors and lead her team, that everything is going to be smooth sailing forward, while she has all these worries and concerns of, well, what if it doesn't, and how's this going to be, right? And so that talk about mental load and of course fatigue that comes with that. And
Yeah.
so being able to supply her with different tools that she can utilize to help manage that stress and to get that weight off of her shoulders is, number one, self-care and self-compassion, so that she
Mm.
can recharge, refocus, and stay clear in finding those creative, out of the box ideas that are going to help propel her organization forward in the way that she would like.
Yeah, nice, nice. I love those terms, self-care, self-compassion. And in the courses we teach in the various certification courses, and Kim, you've been part of it and are coming on board as our faculty member as well, is I think it's Tony Schwartz, he talks about managing energy, not time, right?
Mm,
So
yeah.
we manage our energy, that's managing that, overwhelm and getting and stress mastery, all the things we coach, and we coach as well as executive coaches. Um, yeah, so important, so important. Peter, anything? How did you manage as a leader? You had a lot of
Mm.
responsibility on your shoulders. How did you manage I know,
Well,
the mental burden?
so the mental burden, from my past experience anyway, you had conflict resolution lots of times.
Mm.
You're on a team of people that are spending up to 80 hours a week together. You're like a family almost. So there's going to be conflict for sure. And that conflict, you got to manage that. So you're coaching the people who are having the conflict. And if you can get that under control quickly, there's less of a burden on the leader himself or herself, because things are happy again, that type of thing. I mean, a big part of it also, I know our company was good at like preparedness. So we'd do role playing sometimes when we had a leadership meeting where you had you simulated uh, a difficult conversation with someone, for instance, and the role playing involved you being the person who's probably underperforming, and you had to have another guy would do the talking to you, and then you reverse roles,
Mhm.
and so by acting out these scenarios, it did prepare you to handle them situations in a better way, I guess, and just gave you insight on both sides and how to handle it with grace and empathy, and just enable you to be a better leader
So
in
sort
that
of
sense. So
preemptive training, right? You're training for
for sure.
those potential scenarios that could happen. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Kim, anything else you want to add here?
Not at the moment.
Okay. And Carm, how when we
Yeah.
talk about mitigating the mental burden on leaders, and how, again, even taking a step further, then how can a leader, by leading with a coach mindset and practice,
Uh,
help mitigate and prevent or mitigate, I guess, and minimize the mental burden on themselves?
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts here. Much as you've already described, both Kim and Peter, is that we have to start to take control of what we can control.
Hmm.
I don't know. I would say 80% of the leaders I work with from a coaching perspective have a challenge with work-life harmony and managing those things that are outside of their control.
Right.
Where, as Kim described, they're worried about the six things that might happen if I do X. Now, you have to understand those. But if those things are outside of your control, spending energy, as you described, on things that might happen in the future is not a good use of your time, because the mental burden and stress associated with that is that you are not going to be successful because you're going to be overwhelmed and overburdened. So what I suggest to folks is you look at all the options, you choose with your team the option that's in the best interest of the organization that helps you to fulfill that mission, and then you deploy it. And then you adjust as necessary. But you're not going to control all of the downstream issues, and spending a lot of energy on downstream issues that may never take place is really not a good use of your time as a leader or your team's time.
I would expect as a coach, probably we've all been there, right? We've had a number of sessions with clients where they're like catastrophizing, right? Like this is about to happen, or this could happen. Well, it hasn't. So let's just talk about the here and now, what's within our power of control right here. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and it's very similar to when people really struggle with relationships, and Pete talked about conflict, is that for whatever reason, we want to attack that conflict as it's a personal attack against me as an individual, as a leader. And instead, if you can turn it up towards, is what we're having conflict about in support of the mission? And if it is, then why are we having such conflict about it?
Right. Nice.
Right?
Take foot.
Because if we can turn it towards how does what we're talking about support the purpose of the organization, you can redirect the conversation around me versus you to us fulfilling the mission.
Right.
And to me, it is a good way to bring things back into control, because those are things you can control.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Anyone else? I think we might have lost Gabrielle. That's okay. She had to drop off. Anyone else have anything you want to add to that before we wrap up? Well, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, touching back on the self-care and the self-compassion to help with that, sense of overload, having those supports in place, whether it means having a meditation room in the office, or even if you're working remotely from home, a place that you can go and just kind of reflect for 30 seconds, or maybe it's, walking around the office building or walking around your neighborhood for 5 minutes, right? Having those different, pieces and anchors in the back of your mind that, okay, I can tell I'm spiraling. I've been working too many hours. I had too much coffee, but I still have more to go. What can I do to pause, reflect, get a little bit more clarity,
Press that
and
reset
reset?
button, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Burden. Because again, we want to be mindful too that our employees are watching us, right? So if I think we might have lost, you might be having some technical
Oh,
issues.
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, just to wrap up, like employees are always watching us, right? And we want to be leading by example. That's not to say we're going to be perfect, but the more we can get our house in order, the better we're going to be, reflecting our stress mastery and our ability to manage our energy versus our time and all that. And that will go a long way with keeping a calmness and an order amongst, your team, right? Well, this brings us to the end of another episode of the Executive Wellness Unplugged podcast. So, as we move forward, let's carry these insights with us, embrace and act on what we've learned in our organizations and our communities. And in wrapping up, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our esteemed panelists, Carm, Gabrielle, Kim, and Peter. Thank you for your commitment to nurturing leaders as coaches, and for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us. I will be sure to link up your bios and your contact information in the show notes. And if you're a leader watching this episode and are inspired by what we talked about and my guests, you can learn more from them and be coached by them as facilitators, that they'll be participating as facilitators in the next offering of our interactive workshop style leader turn coach course. That's happening on March 13th and 20th of 2025. There'll be half-day workshops from 9 to 1 p.m. Eastern on both days. So be watching, for more course details and registration links on our webpage. Follow me on LinkedIn and social media by, clicking on that little bell, or, visiting our webpage, workplacewellnesscoe.com. And also we'll update further information and update the notes of this in this episode show notes. And remember, most importantly, that every conversation and every coaching moment can create ripple effects that can lead to profound change. So thanks for watching. Until next time, be well and keep on keeping it real.